Baghdad Bob is an ancient meme from the American invasion of Iraq in 2003. As the Minister of Information, he delivered misinformation that denied the seriousness of the invasion. He claimed those saying otherwise had a sickness in their minds.
I tell you, I inform you that this speech is too far from the reality. This is a part of their sickness of their brain.
لا وجود للعلوج الأمريكان في مدينة بغداد.
There is no any trace, no any existence to the American troops or British troops in Baghdad at all.
أبدا.
At all.
This is a story about three Baghdad Bobs of the pandemic. Three pandemic Bobs. By the new year of 2020, a new virus had spilled into the human population. By February, it was clear that its spread could be incredible. One person with the virus boarded the Diamond Princess cruise ship, and a few weeks later, over 600 of those aboard had caught it. Quarantine on the ship had slowed its spread.
WHO said on February 27th that COVID-19 has pandemic potential.
This virus does not respect borders.
Well, a pandemic is when you have an infectious disease that is being consistently and sustained transmission from person to person through a wide range of regions, countries, and areas of the globe. I think, Michael, that we are clearly at the brink of that.
It will go away, just stay calm, it will go away. We want to protect our shipping industry, our cruise industry.
We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
Virus, we've been working very hard on this. We've made tremendous progress. Today I am officially declaring a national emergency. Two very big words.
March 15th, states began to implement shutdown orders to prevent the spread of COVID-19.
As David said, we're going to win. And when it comes back, we're going to have a healthy workforce, and we'll make these companies come back. But here we go with the market. And obviously the market is saying, let's do something big.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We're going to begin tonight with breaking news, and it is sobering. Tonight, more than 10,000 people have been killed by the coronavirus here in the U.S., and experts say we should brace for things to get even worse before the week is over.
In the summer of 2020, the shelter-in-place orders were lifted by the states. The deaths in the U.S. passed 100,000. Our first pandemic Bob is Jeffrey Tucker of the American Institute of Economic Research, the AIER. The AIER is a right-wing propaganda organization with a history of climate change denial. Here are a few recent articles on climate change using a different style of rhetoric than simple denial. They declare climate alarmism a thing and claim the real threat is from policy, not climate change itself. Take note of this rhetoric. The next article decides climate hysteria is a thing and says politics is not the answer. But anyone with an internet connection can look up the definition of politics and see this as pure nonsense. This article dismisses climate activism as unjustified ideology. These tactics will become useful for our pandemic Bobs. Here's Jeffrey on how he sees the political value of digital media.
From this mountain, and it's called government, and we don't know what to do with it. We can scream at it and say, go away, go away, go away. It's not getting us very far. But some very creative people in the private sector have figured out how to dig underneath it, go around it, scale it with special new tools. That's how I think of digital media.
Can I have a check? Do you accept crypto?
You know, you might be thinking, look, it sounds like the greatest stuff ever. If that was so great, why wouldn't everybody be using it? I agree. I mean, sometimes you look at it and think, why isn't the future here yet, you know?
Mr. Tucker would not let his lack of previous knowledge get in the way of his pandemic commentary.
My training is entirely in economics and not in infectious disease. On the other hand, when the Wuhan virus started arriving in January, I downloaded Cell Biology for Dummies from Amazon and immediately knew more than all the top officials of the CDC, apparently.
Cell biology? Why would you focus on how cells work?
And it was a very good lesson for people that we should be normal in the presence of a disease, viruses, or even a pandemic. We should be smart, use our intelligence, and rely on our medical professionals, and go about our lives without disruption as much as possible, because that is the best way to deal with and manage disease. But the medical professionals in the 1930s said, you know, that's going to be a difficult sell for the American people. To tell people that they should get sick so that they can get stronger, oftentimes asymptomatic. And by the way, this doesn't apply to like HIV or Ebola, you know, not every virus, but especially for something like a coronavirus or a flu, we know, and you know, the common cold is this a variant of coronavirus. We know that the best way to gain immunities to this is to get it. And then you create herd immunity, a theory that was really developed out in the 1960s and 1970s. I think my point, Jennifer, is this. That was a very sophisticated generation. They really figured it out.
This Cell Biology for Dummies enjoyer would definitely need help persuading people to go get infected. So he turned to an old tactic of climate change deniers. Find some dudes with credentials that already agree with you and amplify them.
Some of them began to speak out. I noticed one in particular, Martin Kulldorff. And then also I noticed Sunetra Gupta, and also Jay Bhattacharya, who's a similarly highly credentialed MD, PhD, you name it, at Stanford. Sunetra is over at Oxford, and Kulldorff is Harvard. I noticed that they started to speak out a little bit. And I began to feel bad for Martin, because I thought, you know, it must be a lonely life over at Harvard being against lockdowns at this point and taking a risk to his career to speaking out this way. So I just quickly dropped him a Twitter note. I said, listen, we've got a nice place here. Why don't you come and visit us 2 hours away?
Somebody is paranoid and they go around being worried about dying from cancer, or dying from cardiovascular disease, or dying from diabetes, or having a car accident, or dying from the annual flu, then yeah, maybe they want to add COVID-19 to this long list of things to be afraid of. And maybe they should also have some, do some counseling. But for the most of us, this is one more thing in the things that could happen to us, but it doesn't make sense to go around and be terrified about it. Instead, when we drive a car, we put on the seatbelts because that lowers the risks. It doesn't eliminate the risk, but it lowers the risk. So with COVID, we should wash our hands more carefully, and that lowers the risk, but it doesn't eliminate it. So we have to view COVID-19 as one of many things that can happen in life, but we shouldn't let it interrupt life, because that actually has much worse consequences.
How the Koch network hijacked the war on COVID. That's the headline of a new report looking at how a right-wing network linked to billionaire Charles Koch has played a key role in fighting public health measures put in place by governments during the pandemic, including mask and vaccine mandates, contact tracing, and lockdowns. The institutions with ties to Koch include ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, the American Institute for Economic Research, Donors Trust, the Hoover Institution, and Hillsdale College.
I am Scott Atlas, one of the co-founding fellows, along with my colleagues Martin Kulldorff and Jay Bhattacharya, who I'm sure everyone here knows as well. It's a great honor to be working as a group with everyone here. I have the particular pleasure of introducing Martin Kulldorff tonight. He is truly an authority on all of the things that we think he might know, but he is more than that.
If you go back in history a little bit, 2 years, to March of 2020, when we first heard the news about this new disease outbreak in Wuhan, I was very afraid for about 20 minutes.
If I were going to describe AIR's mission in 2020 in a phrase, I would say it's saving science from hysteria. I've learned so much this year. The power of truth, the power of speaking, the importance of ideas, the need to preserve civilization in the midst of political and social panic.
Two senior White House officials actually convened a call, and they held up something called the Great Barrington Declaration.
Earlier this month, several scientists authored a document called the Great Barrington Declaration. You should read it. It's sensible, it's smart, it's moderate.
There's a sense in which there's nothing we've really said over the last 9 months that's radical.
That declaration, posted by an American economic think tank, promotes focused protection of the vulnerable until we reach herd immunity. A new memo released by a group of international researchers counters. It's dangerous, unsupported by scientific evidence, and doesn't work.
Everywhere in the world where this approach has been used, cases have inevitably spread from populations that are conventionally considered low risk into the broader, more vulnerable portion of society, leading to thousands of deaths.
Do you support herd immunity as a strategy?
Publicly, he won't say it.
The cure cannot be worse.
But the U.S. president openly embraces scientists pushing herd immunity plans.
From Scott Atlas's book, he describes a secret meeting between President Trump and a couple of our pandemic bobs.
As they've said about AIR now for all these years, you were right. Oh, you're right about that. You're right about that. And I have every confidence the same is going to be true this time.
They're spiking up big. They're shutting down. They're locking down. I disagree with that because we're never going to lock down again. We locked down. We understood the disease. And now we're open for business, and that's what it is.
Yeah, and the fear is part of the public health. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. I'm not going to say polite. I try to think of a more polite way to say it, but it was essentially a propaganda campaign to induce panic in the population.
Worried about 10 minutes because then I looked at the data, the very early data from Wuhan, and I saw that there was, at that time we didn't know about the infection fatality ratio, so we didn't know how many people would die among those who were infected. Yeah. But from the Wuhan data we could actually get a really good idea about the relative mortality by age. Yeah. And already then it was clear that there was more than 1,000-fold difference in mortality between the oldest and the youngest.
I'm not going to shut down the economy. I'm not going to shut down the country. I'm going to shut down the virus.